Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, or UK political news update as well, concerning, well, eventually it will concern Keir Starmer's Labour conference speech as a Prime Minister. And I'll talk about that in a second, but I want to talk about the nemesis to Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage at the moment, and Reform UK as a party that is supposedly going to be challenging everyone. Nigel Farage is going to be our next Prime Minister, according to everyone, and Reform UK are just going to sweep the elections in 4 years' time. Now, 4 years is a long time, and I think people will get a lot more of a sense of who Reform are before then. And there are all these questions about whether they are going to become a repackaged version of the Conservative Party. But I just want to point out something that happened the other day. I've already spoken to you about how Nathan Gill, the leader of Reform UK in Wales, so one of the countries of the United Kingdom, whereby Reform UK are one of the opposition parties, he's in charge of Reform UK's operations in the whole of Wales. And he was in the UKIP, UK Independence Party, and the Brexit Party before it became Reform UK. And there's video clips of him showing people around the European Parliament, because he's a member of the European Parliament. He was just in court the other day where he admitted to bribery on behalf of Russia. Russia bribed him to say things that were beneficial to the Russians, to the pro-Russian Ukrainians, vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia in general. So he is what I would call a traitor to the United Kingdom. This should be absolutely massive news. Massive news. It should be front page newspaper stuff in the UK, and yet it is somewhat buried down the list. Zia Youssef, who is one of the leaders of Reform UK, was asked about this on BBC Breakfast the other day, and the interview, I'm not going to play it to you, but it was not a tough interview for him, and he managed to just evade answering questions on Nathan Gill, basically saying he's a nobody, and that Reform UK is a nascent party. Well, actually, no, he wasn't a nobody. He's been pictured with Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is on record calling him a decent, honourable guy, Nathan Gill, and yet he's accepted briberies. And as I talked about the other day, there are connections with Russia. There are connections between Nigel Farage and Russia. He appeared on RT something like 20 times. They were offering him a show. They're in consultations over whether he should have a show on Russia Today, which is the Russian propaganda network, state propaganda network. He was even knighted on there in a fake ceremony on Russia Today by a child. And just, yeah, he's also expressed, Nigel Farage, pro-Russian narratives in terms of the EU and NATO being responsible for the war in Ukraine, etc., etc. So, I'm fairly confident that Russia have their fingerprints all over Reform UK. I am getting inundated with Reform UK stuff since Elon Musk changed the algorithm on Twitter the other day. He said, "Does anyone notice anything different? I've changed the algorithm and I'm getting just all sorts of Reform UK propaganda." Now, I'm saying this because there's this developing narrative of Reform against Labour against Reform. They're kind of forgetting the Conservative Party. People are assuming that the Conservative Party are basically not really going to be a meaningful opposition in the next election, which is quite frankly incredible. It's one of the oldest political parties in the world, if not the oldest, and they appear to be struggling for their own existence at the moment because of Reform UK. And what you've had is the media getting behind Reform UK massively in the UK. So the Daily Mail and the Daily Express over the last few days have ran massive front page articles absolutely slagging off Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer the other day in an interview was asked about a policy for indefinite leave to remain people who have been here for 40 years, 50 years on indefinite leave to remain. The Reform UK policy is going to be, it appears, to send them back to wherever, right? And when asked directly about this, is this a racist policy, Keir Starmer had to say yes or no, and he actually did answer a yes or no question. He said, yeah, it is a racist policy. That was then interpreted as calling by all the media and by Nigel Farage and Reform, because of course they're going to capitalise on that, as calling all Reform UK supporters racist. And so now all the newspapers have gone to town on that Keir Starmer is attacking Reform UK supporters as being racist. Now you can probably make a case that there is a deal of racism within Reform UK. All racists are Reform UK supporters, but not all Reform UK supporters are racist. That kind of approach. I think Keir Starmer was absolutely justified in his opinion, but the problem is this was kind of a gotcha moment where you're like, now we're going to use that. And so you've then had this Labour conference taking place in Merseyside, in Liverpool area, that is the opportunity for Labour to reassert themselves as the governing party and as a party that won a pretty wide majority, although it's quite thin, wide but thin, to reassert themselves on the domestic psyche, really. And Nigel Farage was obviously, no matter how the conference went, no matter what Keir Starmer said, Nigel Farage was going to be like beating the drum for, these guys being anti Reform UK voters and claiming everyone's racist who disagrees with them and blah blah blah. And that actually wasn't how it was originally expressed. So I think that's unfair, but you can imagine that Reform are going to do that. That's politics for you. The problem for Labour is that basically all of the media sources, entities appear to be kind of against them, either overtly, like the Daily Mail and Daily Express, or kind of implicitly, like Sky News and like people like Sam Coates on Sky News and the BBC even platforming Reform UK massively. And I think that it's going to be really difficult for Reform UK to be beaten back in the next election unless there is some kind of more formal progressive alliance or similar. Right. So just to let you know, the connections to Russia in Reform UK need to be front page news in the UK, but they're not. And yet it's being reported in the New York Times. UK politician admits making pro-Russia statements in return for bribes. New York Times article. As Liz Webster says, the truth, Russia's fingerprints are all over Brexit and Reform UK. Farage's spin machine keeps selling sovereignty while his top lieutenants were literally on Moscow's payroll, but only the New York Times is telling the full story. Why not Britain's press? Why is Britain's press so quiet on this? You have the Brussels Times here reporting on it. Gill was at heart of Brexit and Reform, but the British press treats his Kremlin ties as an embarrassment to be forgotten. That's what the Brussels Times is reporting. And here we have a German newspaper as well. And in fact, I've seen a number of German outlets reporting on this this news. It's pretty incredible as far as I'm concerned. Now, we also have the idea that Nigel Farage is seen as the next prime minister, and it's all about reform, by the point of fact that Israel's foreign minister didn't even go and speak to Keir Starmer recently. He went straight to speak to Nigel Farage, which is an incredible slight. But of course, this was after the UK announced that they were formally recognising Palestine as a nation. So the foreign minister for Israel went and spoke to Nigel Farage, seeking Nigel Farage's support for Israel, rather like MAGA is far more likely to support Israel than Palestine. And there's that element in the UK. Now, I'm going to play you the end of Nigel Farage's speech here. And I'm not doing this as a kind of like, well, hey, yay, Labour. But just to communicate to you that a lot was riding on this. And actually, I've listened to the entire speech, a good hour speech there. And well, it actually wasn't a full hour because there was someone else speaking first on this video. But anyway, whatever. Keir Starmer had to do really well in this speech. And actually, this was the best speech he's ever given. I'm pretty sure by a country mile. This was a very good speech, and it was rapturously, supported by the conference. As you'd expect, these are Labour Party members, but it was seen as pretty successful. And the problem is for stuff like this is the general public won't get to see this. If you read the Daily Mail and Daily Express, and you exist on GB News, you're not going to see Keir Starmer's speech. It's just as simple as that. So this has a very limited effect. What I wanted to do was highlight, and I'm going to play you the whole last section of the speech, only because, like, if I took out the Ukraine bit from it, you wouldn't see it in the context. This is and this is why I've just given you the whole bit about Farage and Reform. What Labour are trying to do at the moment is paint Farage and Reform as disuniting, as divisive, and as not having a positive vision of the UK. It's always about whinging and whining about immigrants and about trans and woke and this and that, saying, you know, what we don't want rather than what we would like it to be. And of course, what they would like it to be is a version of the UK from 70 years ago or something. But this is quite an interesting approach from Starmer and Labour, which is to say, look, we are renewing Britain. It's not a new type of Britain. It's renewing what we love about Britain and bringing that into a modern context. And it's about seeing reform as understanding that we have a broken Britain. And this is what MAGA campaigned on. The problem is it's much easier to campaign on fear and fear mongering than it is on, you know, joy and positivity. That's what we saw from the American election in 2024. But the idea was that the Democrats are trying to paint a positive vision of the US, and MAGA were trying to say the whole time that, hey, the US is broken. We want to make America great again. And that's what Farage wants to do with Reform, actually pretty explicitly in saying that, hey, this is a MAGA 2.0 type party. Yeah, he's a massive fan of Trump. He's a friend of Trump's. He goes to his rallies and he's basically wholesale nicking their policies, MAGA policies. So he's got this gold card, this Brit card, this Brit whatever it is, a card for Britannia card, I think it is, so that we attract millionaires in. You just pay a bunch of money and then you get citizenship. But if you're a hardworking care worker, then you don't get to work here, even though we really need you. It's that type of thing. But I think you'll find that Reform are going down the we need to make Britain great again, which is to say it is broken now. And that is the context to this. So this is the whole last part of this speech by Keir Starmer, which is pretty rousing, I think, for him, is about we are not a broken Britain. And in the middle of that is the Ukraine part. And what I love about this is the whole conference stands up and applauds the Ukraine bit. So really, this is everything I've said already. It might be me trying to have a go at Reform or whatever, but it's trying to give you the context to how and why this was delivered at their party conference. So much riding on it, but he still includes Ukraine, and there's still a massive support for Ukraine within the conference hall, which I think is reflective of the British public as a whole. I think we love the underdog and we are supportive of Ukraine, and there is still that cross-party support for Ukraine that starts to wane when you get to Reform UK. So I saw a Reform UK AI video that was produced the other day. You know, they're talking about we've had this whole thing about putting flags up everywhere on lampposts and whatnot. In the AI video, they were taking down a Ukrainian flag and putting up a Union flag. And so even from a Reform UK point of view, this is like, no, we don't want to support Ukrainian flag waving. And in fact, I think in one of the councils that they are now running, Reform has taken down Ukrainian flags at the council. So if you're a supporter of Ukraine, I don't think Reform should be the party for you. Now, let's go to Keir Starmer and see how it leads up to his support for Ukraine, and then I'll let it play on to the end.
That's why I just do not accept that Britain is broken. There are so many opportunities to make a difference. The energy of the future, we're backing it. Carbon capture here in Merseyside, the Celtic Freeport in South Wales, offshore wind turbines made and built in Humberside, brilliant scientists in the heart of Middle England developing nuclear fusion. Is that Broken Britain conference? Look at the investment. Tech companies queuing up to back this country, saying that we are indispensable for the AI future. Now, those companies can invest anywhere in the world, but they're choosing us. They're choosing Hartlepool, Warrington, Belfast, East Midlands. Is that Broken Britain conference? Those 3 trade deals we struck with India, with the US, with our fellow Europeans, a signal to the world that Britain is back, that stability has returned. Is that Broken Britain conference? Or our ironclad and never-wavering support for the brave people of Ukraine, the yellow and blue flag flying on churches and village halls, the length and breadth of the country. Is that Broken Britain conference? And then conference, there's Melanie from Calderdale in West Yorkshire. She runs an organisation called Our Place. It's for carers and people cared for, or just people who are lonely, organising a couple of meetups a week. That doesn't sound like much, but for those people, it's everything. Is that Broken Britain? Or take Caitlin, down here, just 15 years old from Barnet. Now, Caitlin, like me, loves football, but there was no girls' team at her school, so she set one up, the first of its kind. And now conference, she plays for Camden Town Women, and that's nearly as good as Arsenal. She coaches as well at Potter's Bar Little Lionesses, just 15 years old. Is that Broken Britain? What about George here, who delivers food parcels in Telford with a smile? Debbie, who recycles school uniforms for hard-up parents in Halifax? Isaac, who scrubbed off that racist graffiti in York? The people who picked up the bricks and rubble in Southport? Alex, who raised money to rebuild the library in this city that was burnt down by thugs last year. Is that Broken Britain conference? Is this country of boundless creativity, of culture, history, music, art and sporting brilliance, of world-class educators, of fearless entrepreneurs, the grit of the Lionesses, the swagger of Oasis, the strength of the Red Roses, the beauty that stretches all the way from the South down to the Shetland Islands, a country that has weathered so many storms and never stopped building its future. Is that really Broken Conference, or can we renew it? Because conference. Thank you, conference. Because I'll tell you this, mere politics cannot break Britain conference. It's not in its gift. And while you may not see them on social media, people like this, they are the real face of Britain. Painting a fence, running the raffle, cutting the half-time orange, or even that gentle knock on the door that checks that your neighbour is all right. That's real Britain conference. Millions of people, miles away from Westminster, giving up their time, taking responsibility, making their community better. And so conference, we will renew Britain with them. Because I've always said that people with skin in the game make the best decisions for their community. And so the money we invest in renewal, whether it's for youth clubs, peers, parks or chippies, we will give control, not to politicians, but to people, to those champions of national renewal. Because while I know nobody wants to hear this from a politician, the truth is we do all have a responsibility to change our country. There are limits to what the state can do on its own. In the end, we really are all in it together. Now, you will never hear that from the politicians of grievance, the attraction of unity. That's something they will never understand. They will never hold out their hand as I do now, to people who may see the world differently, but put the progress of our country first. So if you are a patriot, whether you vote Labour or not, if you want to stand against grievance and renew Britain, then this is your fight too. Because even in a world this dangerous, I do think the politics of grievance is the biggest threat we face, because it attacks who we are, an attempt to turn us into a place where we look at our neighbours in our community, people who may or may not look different to us, and we no longer see them as fellow partners in the project of Britain. Now, the Tories, do you remember them? Conference? I don't know if they believed in grievance politics. And maybe they do now, when you see them turning away from the rule of law. It is honestly hard to tell. But one thing I do know, Conference, is that not once in 14 years did they ever properly stand up to it. But I will. I will fight with every breath I have. Fight for working people. Fight for the tolerant, decent, respectful Britain that I know. People say, Conference, that a nation like ours can't be a community, that it's too diverse, too divided. I reject that. That goes against everything I stand for, everything I've served, everything I understand about this great country that I love. So no matter how many people tell me that it can't be done, I believe Britain can come together, that we can pursue a shared destination, that we can unite around a common good. That is my ambition, the purpose of this government. End decline, reform our public services, grow our economy from the grassroots, and with resolve, with respect, with the flag in our hands, we will renew this country until we can say with total conviction that Britain is built for all. Thank you, Conference. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Conference. Fly those flags. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Turns out I recorded this video and then turned my microphone off during this speech and then forgot to turn it back on, and then the rest of that video and an entire Geopolitics video, an hour-long video with no sound. So that's fun. So what I remember myself saying after this speech is that I think this was a remarkable speech, as in it was very well constructed, like the whole speech, okay? Very well constructed, very well delivered by someone who is not known for his charisma or delivering speeches particularly passionately, and I think he did a really good job there. I thought it was also particularly nice to see a standing ovation for the mention of Ukraine. I mean, it just brought a tear to my eye. Ukraine is still really... is a country that's obviously very much supported across the park in the UK and across the political spectrum, with the exception possibly of Reform of the party that are most likely... I mean, you would never see that in a Reform speech. You didn't see it in a Reform speech. You had people get up and talk about anti-vax and how the COVID vaccine could have caused King Charles's and Kate Middleton's cancers and whatnot. And you're thinking, really? Oh my goodness. But there was no kind of rousing support of Ukraine at the Reform Party conference, and there could have been. I think that's only the sort of thing you get at... Well, you get that from the Conservatives, Lib Dems and Labour. I really do think all three parties, you would feature strong support for Ukraine at. And, you know, that's why I would much more advocate, even I can't believe I'd say this, but I would advocate the Conservatives over Reform every single day of the week. certainly with regard to Ukraine. So it was really pleasing to see that appeared in his speech, because it's really important for also the economic stimulus in terms of our defense industries that are linked, and not to say that he is supporting Ukraine because it's going to stimulate the defense industries. This isn't some kind of military industrial complex conspiracy theory, but actually, industry and foreign policy are often linked, and it was just really, really good to see such overwhelming support for Ukraine there. There was also talk in this prior to the excerpt I showed you of building frigates, ships up in the Clyde in Scotland that is creating jobs for actually, obviously for the UK, but it also fits in strategically with helping allies to defend against adversaries such as Russia. So we are building frigates for example, Norway and others. And there's been this move to use defense spending, or not defense spending, defense. Well, you can argue defense spending as well from government assistance to Ukraine, but also having our major defense companies be part of an economic stimulus for the country, and being at the forefront of tendering for these contracts, either kind of bilaterally or through the EU, as we have signed a trade deal with the EU to be able to access money from there for defense spending. So that was good. That was good to hear. And I think what was very evident is this was trying to build up a positive vision of Britain in a way that we don't necessarily see from Reform, which is very much about division, very much about otherizing others, if you like. And this was more a sense of what Britain could and should be going forward, giving the conference here a sense of unity, that this is the United Kingdom and we are unified in renewing Britain and having a positive sense of who we are for modern times. Reform, on the other hand, are very much a MAGA type of party, quite literally, like they are MAGA 2.0 UK style, where they are importing MAGA policies, Trumpian policies, such as the Britannia card, like the Trump's gold card, where, hey, you can be a rich foreigner and you can set up in the UK and we'll try and attract you over here because we really want your money. Thank you very much. And so you can just buy your way into citizenship. But if you are a low-paid carer, we're not too interested. Oh, no, we need carers. So on and so forth. So, but I think the whole sort of platform for Reform is one of a grievance narrative, as Starmer talks about there, and I think he's absolutely right. It's make Britain great again, because it's not great at the moment. I mean, that's the implication of MAGA. Make America great again is the implication that it's not great at the moment. Thank you very much, and we need to improve it. It's broken. Well, that's the point of Starmer here. It's trying to counter this idea that you've got a broken Britain. There were lots of other elements I liked about the speech and what they were advocating for throughout the whole of the speech, so parts that you haven't seen. I think it's interesting, a digital NHS, so they're really trying to get people to be able to be seen without necessarily having to go to a doctor's or specialist appointment. If you can do it by Zoom, then that should be really advocated for by one and all, because it will end up being cheaper and also easier for people. Maybe an elderly couple live out in a rural community, in a rural setting, very difficult to get to a major hospital for a specialist appointment. Or obviously it's not going to be for everyone, it depends how tech savvy you are, but I think that idea is pretty sound. And this one was interesting to me. So Keir Starmer talked about how he went to University of Leeds, right? And that's all great, because all the best people on earth go to University of Leeds. That's why I went. I wonder how old he is and whether we cross paths at all. Anyway, he went to Leeds University. He was talking about that, but he came from a working class family, and he kind of joked back to what happened in the election campaign. He kept mentioning that his father was a toolmaker, right? And that became a bit of a running joke. He's going to mention he's from a working class background again, because he doesn't sound like it, because he was the first in the family to go to uni and etc., and became this barrister. Now he was talking about his sister being a care worker and his, I think, brother being struggling with education and so on and so forth. And he was saying, look, we've got this goal of 50% of people need to go to university. And he's like, that is a wrong set of values, really, as if anyone that goes to university is somehow better or more useful to society than someone who doesn't. And he's like, so we're going to change this around, because at the end of the day, Labour is a party for the working class, for workers' rights. And he was talking about changing that goal to be 75% going to university and having a gold star apprenticeship, or I forget what the term was, but really going heavy on apprenticeships again and saying, look, these it's just so valuable, this kind of, and then, you know, that was talking about the apprenticeships up in Clyde at these shipbuilding yards, where, you know, these are the people that are building for our future, building for our national defense, and so on and so forth. And I just thought that was really well framed, and also it sounds like a really good policy, and it's stuff like that I think that is really positive. I came away just thinking that this was a very positive speech, well delivered, and it was what he needed, and what the Labour Party needed. Whether it will have an effect is another question, because of course, you know, who watches this? I mean, I'm a politically motivated person, so I'll sit and watch an hour-long YouTube video of Keir Starmer giving a speech. Otherwise, you're not going to be watching certainly the whole thing, so you see whatever your news outlet delivers to you, or whatever snippet you might see on some kind of social media site. But if you live in an information silo that is not friendly to Keir Starmer, which is most information silos, then you're never gonna appreciate that speech for what it was. And that's definitely the challenge that Labour have, because at the end of the day, reform and grievance narratives in general have a much greater, I think, shareability. They're you know, people, fear sells, right? And so grievance narratives and otherizing, demonizing, in this case, immigrants or whatever, is something that reform should be able to easily sell to anyone who cares. And they already have a pretty decent flat platform on social media. So TikTok, they did very well reform on TikTok in the last elections and whatnot. So I think Labour very much struggles with messaging. So they've got no TV stations and the Guardian and the Mirror. And that's it. And even then, like the left is hating on Labour at the moment, because Labour have shifted to the centre. They'll see it as shifting to the right. So Labour are now really properly centrist. It's hilarious that they're called left and blah, blah, blah by the people on the right, but because really they're getting attacked from people on the left for being too right-wing, attacked by people on the right for being too left-wing, which probably tells you that they are comfortably in the centre. You've got Lib Dems operating in that centre ground as well. You've got Conservatives supposedly somewhat a little bit to the right, but I don't know. They're vying to be further to the right, depending on whether they're going to be competing with a reform or giving a different narrative than reform, and maybe adopting a centre-right position rather than a far-right populist position. But what's happened with Labour is fascinating. So you've had this breakaway party called Your Party. Jeremy Corbyn, the former very left-wing leader of the Labour Party, was very popular with a certain demographic, and the progressive vote really likes Jeremy Corbyn. Now, he then essentially kind of got kicked out of Labour Party, and he's now gone and started his own party with some other independent kind of pro-Palestine MPs and a Labour defector called Zara Sultana, who is very popular with the young and is a pretty decent MP. And that was kind of a big loss for Labour. She went and they've started Your Party with 700,000 people signing up like straight away to it. But then it was just a massive scandal of like there was an issue between Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn and his peeps, and they're all trying to sort out this grassroots led Your Party, right? And now there's the kind of Mahmoud Sultana camp, Corbyn camp, and now the Our Party. So it's Your Party, and then these people saying, actually, we're going to run this. You guys, you do the MP stuff. We're going to run it as a party, and it's going to be called kind of Our Party, or we're the Our Party part of the Your Party, or whatever. Anyway, it's all been very controversial, and it hasn't had a particularly successful start, and so people have been, because there was money that changed hands for signing up to the party, and then people are annoyed that all went wrong, and so there's a lot of controversy. I won't go into the deepities of it, but the Green Party, who are selling themselves as now the progressive left, so they've stopped trying to be a mature Green Party, kind of, I say mature, like a sort of well oiled political party like you see in, say, Germany, that exists more in the centre left area, like they've embraced NATO and defence and supporting Ukraine. The left, the Green Party in the UK is kind of embracing a more socialist positioning and kind of pacifistic, pro-Palestine position, and so they are attracting a lot of the people that came out the left of the Labour Party to join your party. Will actually, now they've been disenchanted with that, arguably, although it's still ongoing, they're now joining the Green Party, or some of them are, and the Green Party are going to be, and your party, whatever that eventually becomes, will be biting away at Labour on the left, whereby Lib Dems and Tories and Reform will be biting away at them on the right. And so Labour have got a really difficult time going forward. Because they will bleed a lot of their left-wing voters. Their progressive voters will go and are definitely seeing that Labour are, because they've got a problem in that the numbers don't add up at the moment. They need to grow the economy. The economy has to grow for all the rest of their agenda to succeed. But they also need to curtail some welfare spending. And the welfare spending is something that the progressives see as untouchable. You can't touch a welfare system. You call yourself the Labour Party, and then here you are, attacking this and attacking that. Winter fuel payments was one, and it's kind of annoying because I think the welfare system does need. I've got some personal experience and opinions on that, but I think the welfare system does need reforming, and they tried to grasp the nettle there and do some really difficult things, and the right attacked them, knowing that these would be unpopular, even though they're exactly the sort of things the right would want them to do, because they would want to do those sort of things. So get rid of some of these big government welfare system payments and schemes and whatnot, or at least slice and dice them a little bit. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So Labour, they've got this difficult situation where they've recognised they're losing some of their working class to the right-wing populists. So they kind of want to be hard on immigration. They want to curtail welfare spending. But at the same time, the more they do that, the more they lose the left to the Green Party and this new kind of your party. And so Labour are going to be in trouble next election, I think, irrespective, unless they have some really great success in the next 3-4 years in terms of running the country and getting the economy going. But of course, with the challenges of AI and Donald Trump being an absolute wingnut economically, that is a challenge. So Labour have just got a massive challenge, no matter how you look at the situation. And I think their only hope really next election will be to go into some kind of progressive alliance with the Lib Dems. And then it depends where the Greens are. They might agree to, not contest certain places if the Greens are doing well there, in order to make sure, because the Greens are now pitting themselves against Nigel Farage. This is your right-wing populist, Nigel Farage. We can be Zach Polanski, the leader who's very charismatic. He's a young guy. He's tech savvy. He's all over the internet at the moment. He's getting loads of sound bites, and he's getting on some of the major mainstream media outlets as the new Green Party leader is placing himself as the antithesis of Nigel Farage. So you got these two kind of going at each other, but actually, Labour kind of would want to be that as well, the kind of left-wing, progressive, anti-Farage, but actually, in order to run a country, you're not going to run a country just attracting the progressives, and you're not going to run a country just attracting the right-wing sort of populists. And so therefore, that's why parties err towards the centre more often than not when they're trying to get into power. And now they've adopted the centre ground. Now, really, I would say Labour are a centrist party. I'd say no longer are they. Well, they're centre left, I would have said, but at most they're kind of like, centre left centre, if you see. And yeah, so anyway, that's my appraisal of what took place in what happened with the speech, and I think it's a speech worth listening to as a whole. I listened to it on two times speed, and he sounds even more kind of up for it at 2 times speed, I guess. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.